and is moving to put together a so-called cabinet. Now, I'll come back to the vote fraud in a minute, but I want to give you a sense of a bigger picture in which this is occurring, because you cannot lose sight of the strategic fight that actually defines why there was vote fraud to ensure that Biden would become the president. And this goes back to the City of London, which is where the initial attacks on President Trump came from that led to Russiagate, the impeachment fight, and so on. And it's clear that the City of London is pushing hard to make sure that Joe Biden is the president and Trump is eliminated from the scene. Now, we mentioned this the other day. The Economist, the paper of the City of London, or the magazine of the City of London, pronounced the need for a Biden presidency. The Financial Times had exactly the same thing. And what's behind this? Well, there are two things. There's the strategic crisis and the move toward a global reset. Let me start with the global reset, because it's clear now that whether it's the International Monetary Fund's Georgieva, or whether it's Christine Lagarde, the head of the European Central Bank, or top officials of the US Federal Reserve, they're talking about moving ahead with a global digital currency. And this has several aspects to it, but one of which is to give them the power to inflate the currency, to continue with quantitative easing, to bail out the speculators, and over time create an inflation that will enable them to pay off the debt with cheap money. At the same time, stealing what's left of the funds going to the physical economy, and possibly including the theft of your pension funds, your commercial bank accounts, and so on, to be replaced by a global digital currency which will be placed in your account by the central bank, which will also control national spending policy. We have the, besides the City of London praising the Biden victory, alleged victory, you have on Wall Street this memo we reported last week from JP Morgan Chase, which welcomed a Biden presidency because it said Biden will do a lockdown which will require a new bailout, and that this new bailout will lead to an appreciation of the stock market. Now, the part of the global digital currency in this reset, what Mark Carney, the former head of the Bank of England, and others called a financial regime change, part of it is to fund the Green New Deal. And this was presented by Prince Charles, remember the British, the Davos World Economic Forum, Carney from the Bank of England, now with the UN as a climate guru. It came from BlackRock, which unfortunately has a position doling out the funds from the relief plan in the US, and Michael Bloomberg, who's the former UN guru on climate change, and who spent more than $100 million to try to get Biden into the White House. And what's the policy of the Green New Deal? End the US scientific and technological orientation. Shut it down. No more research and development. No more funding going into production, goods producing sector, improving agriculture. None of that. All of that will be replaced by a globalized free trade system. Secondly, take down US energy production. That was clear from what Biden said in the second debate and in a number of other comments he's made. Third, shut down President Trump's Artemis program, the new space program which has the intention of putting a man or woman on the moon by 2024, which has the technologically progressive elements that were there with NASA under John Kennedy. No, that cannot be allowed. That's got to be shut down, according to the City of London. Put the U.S. back into the Paris Climate Accord, which Biden has promised will be one of his first acts by executive order. Remember how the Democrats said Trump shouldn't be issuing executive orders? Well, get ready for a whole slew of them. And finally, more of the anti-sovereign free trade agreements. Now, what we're seeing is a color revolution targeting the United States. The intention is to overturn what Trump was trying to do, to reassert a position of American sovereignty, not as America only, but as the sovereign nation that will encourage sovereignty for all other nations. Now, while we're in this fight in the United States, let me give you an example of what's happening elsewhere. there have been regime change coups overturned in a number of countries, including Argentina, Mexico. The president of Mexico is refusing to welcome Joe Biden. In fact, he said he knows about vote fraud because his 2006 election was overturned by vote fraud in Mexico. So he said he's still standing by to see what President Trump is going to find. Bolivia. There was a State Department coup on behalf of the banks to throw out the elected government there. Well, the people voted, and what did they do? They overwhelmingly brought back the Evo Morales regime. And in Belarus, there's a fight that's underway that Chatham House, on behalf of British interests, is trying to overturn that government, which would then open a channel for NATO on the Russian border in another country besides Ukraine. Now, this brings us to the strategic danger. You know, Biden is a captive of the war hawks, besides being a war hawk himself. But he's talking about people like Michelle Flournoy, Susan Rice as key people that he would bring in. They're already floating a whole bunch of names. Every single one of them is a supporter of regime change wars, the so-called responsibility to protect, which is an excuse for an imperial geopolitical strategy. Now, you're not worried about the danger here? Let me tell you about an interview done by the British chief of their defense staff, General Nick Carter. He spoke with Sky News, and here's what he said. He warned of the effects of a global financial meltdown, which he said may spark a, quote, new world war. He went on to say that regional conflicts are going to continue. You could see an escalation that would lead to miscalculation, which could lead to a, quote, full-blown war, unquote. This is the head of the defense sector of the United Kingdom, which has great influence still in NATO, but also very close relationship with sections of the U.S. military. This is part of the military-industrial complex coming out of Britain. So keep that in mind. Global financial meltdown, triggering instability and crises and possibly a new world war. Now, where are they talking about? Look at Azerbaijan and Armenia. The president of Azerbaijan today said that there is a way out of the conflict, but the Armenians aren't taking it. Therefore, they're going to continue fighting. Now, this could spill over because Russia has a support. Russia's actually got agreements with both countries, but they have troops in Armenia. Turkey is supporting the Azerbaijan offensive, and they're supporting it including by importing Syrian mercenary jihadists to fight on the side of Azerbaijan. The British defense minister was recently in Turkey and promised weapons. Now, Turkey itself is going through financial instability. Erdogan fired the central bank chief there last week. That's the fourth central bank chief he's fired. And the finance minister offered his resignation. The finance minister of Turkey is Erdogan's son-in-law. And we're seeing a collapse of the lira, the Turkish lira, collapse of living standards. And here's another case where a leader would gladly welcome a war to take people's minds off the collapse of the economy. What else do you